before we start today's show, I just wanted to tell you all that it's a bit sad because I'm actually going to be leaving the radio show. I've only been here a few months since we got going, and I may come back at some point. I'm definitely leaving for a few months, though, because I need to. Just need to go and take care of myself. And so I'm leaving town, leaving West Marin, and I'll be going on a big road trip, and maybe back in the spring or the summer. So I just wanted to take this moment to say thank you to you all, and particularly to Bernie, who started this show and pulled me into it, and to say that I've learned so much from being here, and that I'm very grateful to all of you for continuing the show. I hope it continues to grow and reach new audiences. And it's been really a very deep learning experience for me. I've learned a lot about the issues that we've discussed. It's given me an opportunity to delve into them and to give voice to some of the most critical issues of our times. And, I hope that it continues to grow in leaps and bounds. And now, onwards.
Well, before we go to our topic for today, I feel a strong desire to say, Raven, thank you so much for your genuine, unique contribution to this program. You're not going to be replaced. We will add people like Robin who are immensely talented, and we're so lucky that we can continue the show with Robin here. But Raven, you are a unique person that has a very strong radical self and knows what you know, and trying to live the life the way you know it needs to be lived, and trying to educate your son the way you should, I think. So I admire what you're doing. I wish you really well on this trip, and just know we're going to miss you a lot here.
Thanks, people.
Yeah. And I've enjoyed the little bit of time I had with you, and I want to say how much I appreciate you bring the mother's perspective to all these issues, and that feminine energy, the goddess energy, so to speak, of wanting to be protecting and nurturing. And I love how you have brought that to these issues and brought these issues up to us in that way.
Yeah, and also you always do lots of research. You come to this studio armed with sheafs of paper. We're all just sitting here doing it off the top of our heads, but you come here with this incredible amount of research.
It's all very interesting. It's all very interesting. So on to GMOs in our food and medicines. I'd love you to join our conversation by calling us. I think we already have a caller, but hang on a minute. 415-663-8492. You can also tweet us at Let's Talk on KWMR. So before we take this caller on the air, I just wanted to go over the definition in case anybody's listening and doesn't know what a GMO is. And it is a genetically modified organism, or genetically engineered. We just call them GM, I think, back in the UK. And here they're GMOs. They're organisms used for food and medicine and other scientific industrial uses. Gene splicing technology is used to engineer a specific combination of genes, often from different species like plants, animals, bacteria, and viruses, into new organisms that do not, this is the key point, they do not and cannot occur in the natural world through natural selection. So genetic engineering can only happen in the laboratory. And it is to say that it's not the same as hybridization, which we were talking about just before the show, which occurs when two separate organisms crossbreed to create offspring that display a combination of traits from parent organisms. That's the definition. Do you want to add to that, Robin?
Yes, and sometimes people say, oh, it's just the same as hybridization, or what Mendel taught, cross the pink petunia with the blue petunia, and you're going to get this different petunia. Humans have crossbred through the years for the better crops, for beauty, for food.
Dog type.
For dog types. But that's a total different thing than when you are literally breaking apart DNA, injecting viruses, bacteria, other DNA, non-species specific DNA. So it's not at all the same as how we through the generations have hybridized our crops.
Great. So let's go to our first caller. What do you think about GMOs? Safe, unsafe, ethical, unethical, etc.?
Hi, caller. You're on the air. What's your name, please?
Hi, my name's Pam Larry. Is this Robin Carpenter?
Hi, Pam. This is Robin.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. I just want to let everybody, Pam Larry is the person, the grandma who got the Prop 37 labeling for GMOs for the state of California going, and is kind of, to me, the godmother of the GMO movement here in California. Wow, thanks for calling us, Pam.
Sure. So I just wanted to add, I was listening in, and I just wanted to add a new little twist to what's going on in the GMO world. And one of the things that people might be hearing about, if they haven't already, they're starting to try to call it gene editing.
Ooh, and never heard of it.
Yeah, the definition that you're giving is based on the old form of genetic engineering, which is still being used a lot and still is like what they use for Roundup Ready and stuff like that. But and the BT traits and the stuff that's mostly on the market. But the things like the new potato and the new apple are a new technology. And I predict, and I'm seeing this happen, that the old method of genetic engineering is going to go by the wayside just because of so many reasons. It's much more time-consuming, and it's much more expensive to develop. The new thing to watch for is, and I think they're so clever that they're trying to call it right from the beginning, gene editing. And it's based on a new, very new technology. It's basically just really gotten going since 2014, really, going strong. I think it was developed or first discovered in 2011 or 12. Sorry, I'm not really good with exact dates or stuff like that, but it's very, very new. And they call it RNAi or dsRNA. And this particular form that's really taking the science world by storm is called the CRISPR. That's CRISPR-Cas9 system. And it was not discovered, but it's old knowledge, but that was all of a sudden applied to genetic engineering in a much more efficient and quick way. One of the things I heard was that the older technology would take $5,000 or $6,000, per attempt to try and do something, and this is like $75.
So it's are you saying it's speeding up the industry?
I'm sorry, what?
It's making the industry move faster in terms. Yeah.
Yes, it's moving faster, and it's being applied in many, many different ways. The new animal technologies that you're seeing, not necessarily the salmon, because that's still by the old form, but the new animal technologies, the pigs, the chickens, if you're hearing stories about human embryos being genetically engineered, then it's this system. This is really where they're going with it, and they're touting it, which is so funny to me because in the past they said the other was so precise and so safe. And now, their big line, this is so precise, much more so than the old system. It's kind of funny.
So, Pam, in the gene editing, technologically speaking, not to get too in the weeds on technology, is it different in terms of, is it just a more elegant way they're able to go in and do the genes as opposed to blasting and the other things they were doing in the old technology?
Exactly. They don't use viruses. They don't have to use any of that other stuff. Well, no, actually, I think they do use. Gosh, I'm not a geneticist.
Yeah.
But it's taken from virus technology, and it's pretty fascinating. And I've read quite a bit about it. Of course, been trying to explain it using the language. But basically, they discovered it because they found repeats of certain viruses in the cell structure, and wondered how it got there. And so they're basically, the cells have, this is how I explain it for us lay folks, is that basically cells have the same kind of immunological system that we as humans have. And so it's just like our T cells or something. This is real basic explanation too. Just like our T cells will recognize a foreign substance and go after it. These repetitive parts are of the virus, and so they're using that along. The Cas9 thing is the enzyme. So they're literally it's not about transgenics anymore. It's just about literally changing the structure of the DNA through using, kind of like hacking the system. So I would read up about it.
Gosh, so it's all new to me.
Pam, is that connected to synthetic SynBio?
No,
that's a separate issue. But
they might be doing some of it in SynBio to genetically engineer the yeast and bacteria and all that kind of stuff. But SynBio then is they take that genetic, that new
DNA
yeast or whatever, and they create a product, usually some kind of an oil or a like a extract. Like the biggest thing that's supposed to be on it next is like vanilla extract. So they grow them in vats. Yeah,
that's all really hideous. It's horrible.
So, Pam, one of the things in the traditional GMO world is that they found in testing, because it's been hard to get a lot of testing because Monsanto blocks it and others block it because of patent rights, and the U.S. government doesn't want to do testing. But some of the testing showed that when any time DNA is altered in something, that the human body often reacts to that as an alien protein or creating an autoimmune response. It would seem like even though this is a more elegant editing, still the body would know that the DNA had been disturbed.
Correct. Correct. So that there are already some studies showing that, although they're saying it is more elegant, it still impacts the DNA strains all the way down the chain. It's not like just this one DNA thing, one site is affected, everything's changed.
There probably haven't been that many studies on the health risks.
Oh, no, not at all.
No, mostly they've been...
They're just coming out on the market anyway because the FDA doesn't require any safety studies.
Pam, this is Bernie. I want to go back to when you were leading Prop 37 and the idea of labeling. Are you now at a place where I'm at the place to say, let's just ban this whole enterprise, whether it's the new gene editing or the GMOs in the more typical or the conventional sense, if you will? I think in a way labeling gives them some legitimacy. And I like the notion that we've gone off the rails here with our human hubris to try to engineer all the qualities we want. And if you're not in favor of that, let me ask you, what would you forecast? How many years before I could place an order to get a sort of a designer animal to my liking, where I check off some boxes of combinations I want, and then it gets delivered to me? I mean, that's kind of exciting. I could have a pet that was really perfect.
A chicken salmon.
Exactly.
Delivered by drone.
Well, my first comment would be that there are many, many different viewpoints in this movement, and yours is certainly one I've heard many times. And my response, and my personal opinion is that I support pretty much everything. I don't think it's an either or. I think that the only way that you can have a market, any kind of a market work, is through transparency. So if people don't know where genetically engineered things are, they can't decide, they can't choose the kinds of things that they want to buy. And so I personally think labeling is still really, vital. And I have also personally supported county rights to ban. I don't think that it's possible to ban them entirely. I do believe counties have a right, that the people in those areas have a right to say, we don't want our crops contaminated. I also don't get involved really in the whole medical discussion, primarily because if people are, if they're smart, they're going to, and we have a responsibility in our healthcare to be responsible healthcare consumers. And any drug that we get comes with a long list of side effects. We're basically being warned about anything we're taking, and then it's our choice whether we want to take them or not. But when you start putting things in food and not being honest about it, or putting things outside, my rights are taken away because I no longer have a right to uncontaminated food, and I don't have a right to know what I'm buying.
Yeah.
Well, Pam, I just want to thank you so much for calling in and all the work that you've been doing to bring awareness to this topic. We really thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Pam.
One thing before I go, I want to just please encourage people to visit. There's a new website going up called GMO Science, and it's an answer for all of us working on this, for a place for people to go.
Great.
Is it .org?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
Thanks, Pam.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Bye-bye.
So on the subject of labeling, there was a poll that was done by the Melman Group in December just last month, which showed that 89% of the public are in favor of mandatory GMO labeling. That's a huge number, and nearly the same number of people want those labels to be easy to read, because of course the industry wants to push forward those, what are they called? Those Q label things that you have to read with a scanner on your iPhone.
Little squares.
Nobody's going to use. I've never used one, and I've got a smartphone, and a lot of people don't have smartphones.
QR.
QR, that's it. So, the new poll also shows that this mandatory labeling is supported across the political spectrum. It's not restricted to liberals or progressives. It's, people don't trust this technology in the main. However, the scientists still say, at least, I wouldn't say all scientists, but that's what it looks like on the web, that, like a Pew study in 2014 showed that 88% of, American Association for the Advancement of Science scientists considered GMOs to be safe, and generally safe is the actual term. But, they don't really want labeling because they say it could mislead and falsely alarm the consumers. And then the American Medical Association says that, voluntary labeling is without value unless it is accompanied by focused consumer education. The WHO, the U.S. National Academy of Sciences. I mean, there's a lot of people or organizations out there that say there's no adverse health effects attributed to genetic engineering.
Don't let the public know anything because they'll panic. It's the old story
right.
of disinformation and misinformation of the public.
And treating us like we're such idiots that we don't need to know this. And we talked a little bit earlier about Dr. Nina Fedorov, who was a science advisor to Condoleezza Rice and Hillary Clinton when they were Secretary of State. The Secretary of State has a science advisor to advise them on policies around the world and whatever we're doing or whatever we're pushing around the world. And she was one of the early scientists working on genetically modifying, genetically engineering, and is a huge proponent of GE Foods. She actually helped Clinton campaign against Dr. Vandana Shiva in India when they were trying to change some of the laws in India around genetically modified foods. And she talks so much about GMOs and they're so great. So she went before the House Committee on Ag 2 years ago this March, saying that it would be a bad idea to do labeling of biotech foods because people are just not smart enough to. Basically, the bottom line of her report, which you can look at online, is she was saying, look, there are all these fear tactics and people are overreacting. So if we let them know there are GMOs in there, then they won't buy them and then they'll overreact, and that would be terrible because we would let the ignorance of the public stop this great technology. Yeah. And, it's this creepy, scary thing that they want to shut us out. They're scientists. Why shouldn't we have facts?
Well, they know best.
Yes.
Well, the complexity keeps rising here. Like we learned from Pam, now there's phase 2, if you will, of genetic engineering, or however you want to call it. We're on a continuum. I mean, I see this as a kind of a logical step of the kind of engineering that we try to do with our civilization, because we have all this cheap energy and ability, and we've learned so much. We have all this scientific and technological prowess and know-how that this seems logical. Like, why not have a longer shelf life? Why not have a bigger fish? Why not do all these things? But it's like going in the wrong direction completely, and we've got to somehow stop this craziness because of unintended consequences. I don't think when the Industrial Revolution began, people had, let's change the climate as an idea. That was an unintended consequence. And we're saying the same thing is here, because it's not that we're all smarter or better or whatever, but we can all collectively understand that the direction we're heading in is a dead end. This is not sustainable doing this.
It's a long history of boys and their toys, and wow, this is cool. Let's try this. Let's see what happens.
And it's the U.S., isn't it?
The lack of, the U.S. has slaughtered, murdered, stomped all over the precautionary principle, which is when you're doing something that could have very huge consequences, you want to proceed with caution and you want to err on the side of caution. And because this is so driven, as what Bernie was saying, what it really is why have a bigger fish? Why have this? At the end of the day, it's about control of the food supply and profit and money.
That's right.
And
that's our capitalist system.
That's the system. It rewards whoever can throw something out there and make money off of it. They aren't worried about if their children grow fish scales after eating genetically engineered salmon, or just to be silly. But, they're not thinking about that.
Right, they're not thinking. It's improving on nature. Men always want to improve or manage nature, right? And the unintended consequences of guys tinkering. Everyone thought it was kind of cool when there was a fluorescent glowing sheep or whatever it was. The first thing that they did. Look at this. This is really cool. Just imagine what we could do. Well, and lack of diversity, right? I mean, that's the whole point, is to make nature manageable by cutting down on diversity and channeling stuff through these corporations.
Well, and nature is the enemy.
Patenting genes. I mean,
what's really interesting
life.
Patenting is the underlying driver for all of this, because that's where the profit comes, because you have exclusive rights to this line with all of its virtues that we created for you.
Well, and the irony is in this process, the way they get away with no testing or having it go through is they go to the USDA and they say, this is basically corn. So this is like corn. So the USDA says, we're not afraid of corn, so this is basically the same as corn. So it is and so they go pitch to the USDA, this is corn. This is just regular corn. And they do that, but then they go down the street to the patent office after the USDA says yes. They go to the patent office and they get a patent on it by saying this is a unique life form unlike anything else. So they tell the USDA it's just like corn, and then they go down to the patent office and get a patent on their special unique life form. So, the system's really broken in terms of any kind of control on that.
And the idea of Roundup Ready and other thing, and 2,4-D ready, so that they can spray more pesticides because everything becomes immune to it after a while. So you spray more and more and more super weeds. Now there's Roundup, this fabulous biodegradable, wonderful pesticide, best-selling pesticide. Is now in the water in the Midwest, along with all the fracking.
Well, I've got a factoid. Between 1996 and 2008, the U.S. farmers sprayed an extra 338.3 million pounds of Roundup on GMOs. And, it's not, one of the myths is that we have to use less pesticide or less herbicide, but the fact is they're using more and more because they're becoming resistant. And so, and what kind of effects does this have on? There's all these studies coming out now, aren't there? Now linking gastrointestinal disorders, autoimmune disorders, autism.
Dr.
Parkinson's disease.
Huber, who was on the committee for a bioterrorism, and he is at Purdue University, a revered professor, and works with plant pathologies and diseases. He went directly to Secretary Tom Vilsack. With like a private letter and a letter for the president saying, please do not release this genetically modified alfalfa. Stop all of this. We could have a collapse in our food system. We have seen in the Midwest the sterile, in our livestock, sterile, 50% sterility, abortions, miscarriages, severe genetic deformities, calves and pigs being born with their intestines outside of the body, which there has, and Herbert Huber said, this was going to start happening to people. And I've started checking around and miscarriage. And so now the incidence of babies being born with their intestines outside the body has spiked up. And Dr. Huber said this 5 years ago. He said, you're going to see teen pregnancy rates drop. You're going to see sterility increase in the American population and populations that are exposed to Roundup. And sure enough, everybody's all excited that teen pregnancy rates are dropping. They're not dropping because all of a sudden our teens have lost their desire, And, so there are all these things that he was predicting. And this guy was a retired military, conservative, Midwest guy. And he and these other vets were doing their own secret studies out of the country on it because it's illegal to do any testing on it because it's patented on the Roundup impacts. So these impacts are now being severely felt.
Well, the Bt toxin that's injected into corn, isn't it?
It's actually grows that they actually have it spliced into the corn, so it produces the Bt.
So what happens when an insect eats the Bt is their stomachs dissolve. Okay, it actually explodes their stomach, and that's how they die. And the scientists were always saying, "Oh, this doesn't affect humans; it just applies to insects." But some new studies are coming out now that says actually, yes, it does apply to humans, and this rise in leaky gut syndrome and gut disorders, which leads to inflammation of the body
and obesity,
and diabetes. I mean, the list is actually endless. And there was a study in Canada done just last year, I think it was last year, that showed that 93%, they did pregnant women, 93% of them had Bt in their blood, and 80% of the unborn fetuses had it in their blood as well. I mean, that's just shocking.
And just
I don't think people know that is a result of GMOs. I mean, that the public doesn't understand this yet.
I don't think people understand.
We're eating this food with the BT in it, and we were told, don't worry, your digestive juices will kill it. It would never get into your system. And now almost all Americans have, and most Americans, our gut flora and fauna include BT, and we actually manufacture BT.
I read that, yeah.
Which is a pretty scary thought.
Hi, this is Sandy.
Hi, Sandy.
Robin, you brought up a point about the GMOs in alfalfa and the effect it's having on the animals in terms of the way they're being born. And listening to all this talk about the Zika virus that's going on, this mad media hype that's happening right now, I'm wondering if there could be any connection between GMOs and what's happening there rather than simply a mosquito-borne infection.
Well, actually, people are saying that these genetically modified mosquitoes that were modified to basically get into the gene pool of regular mosquitoes, the Aedes aegypti mosquito that carries dengue fever and the chikungunya diseases. So they were trying to get rid of those, and these mosquitoes were released in Brazil and in other areas where we're now seeing huge spikes in the Zika virus. So people are now saying, oh, these GMO mosquitoes might help get rid of Zika virus. But actually, the areas where these mosquitoes were released are the hot spots for Zika virus. Mm-hmm. So I'm not saying, that's just, it's happening at the same time. So I'm not saying that causality, that is actually the cause. But once again, it's that Pandora's box. If we release these mosquitoes, could it be that the new genetics of the new mosquitoes, because the genetics of the new mosquitoes won't carry the dengue fever or the other tropical diseases, but for all we know, the genetics of these mosquitoes, they weren't worried about Zika, and these mosquitoes, like, their bodies love it, and that makes them uber curious of the Zika. So that could be a factor. It could be that that's not a factor at all, but it's interesting that where they release those is where Zika's really taken off.
I didn't even know that we could modify mosquitoes. Could we modify them to not sting me or bite me?
That's exactly what they've done.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, well, maybe it's not such a bad idea. Oh, kidding.
Well, you don't know.
It's a great idea.
The whole issue is, once again, using the precautionary principle before you release a life form that you cannot control.
Yeah.
Have you thought it through that, maybe we get rid of these other two tropical diseases, but now we get this hideous disease where some countries are advising the women there don't get pregnant for the next 2 years.
Yeah.
As usual, we're just looking at the symptoms and not the root sources of why Zika virus has arisen in the first place.
So Sandy, have you done a little bit of research on that, or what are your thoughts about that?
Well, it just seems to me that these GMOs have huge repercussions in places, as you were saying, that one doesn't expect. And I don't have that much thought about the Zika virus, except that it seemed to me suddenly that this birth defect that's happening may well be connected to GMOs. And the alfalfa release is also a hugely scary thing because it gets into all the milk supply, the cheese supply, et cetera, the food supply.
Yep.
So you're concerned about GMOs. What do you do about that?
Well, I have always eaten organic as long as I've known about it. And I'm very cautious about what I feed people, and including myself and my animals. I have a horse that I try to feed organic hay, but if you board your horse at say, a big ranch, you're kind of at the mercy of what they feed. And I've seen a lot of dietary repercussions in my horse, and I often wonder what's gone into the hay, and there's no way I can really track it down.
Is there a source for organic hay around here? Are you in Westmoreland?
I am. Yeah. I'm in the valley in Woodacre.
Is there a source for organic hay here?
Not locally, but you can get it from the feed stores here.
Okay.
I mean, there's not a grown source that I know about.
Right, but they do stock it at like Toby's or...
I don't know if
they used to. I know they used to.
I got some organic hay from there once. Yeah.
And then besides the GMO factor that's going into the hay, there's all the herbicides and the pesticides and everything else that's gone into the ground. And they're spraying for all sorts of stuff that my horse has had a condition for years now that comes and goes, and I see it in a lot of the horses that seems to be cyclic. A lot of horses will have it at a certain time, and I don't know that it's connected to anything besides the feed, but it seems to me that really is a factor in what's going on. And, the whole food source is contaminated. Where can you really go from there?
Mm-hmm.
Don't let your children play on the hay bales.
Thank you.
No. Anyway, thank you, Sandy.
Yeah,
that's wonderful. Thank you very much.
Okay.
I was just going to educate the public in case they didn't know that the top 8 genetically modified or genetically engineered foods are corn, soy, alfalfa, canola, cotton, papaya, sugar beets, used to make sugar. That's not the beets you buy that are red in the store. Zucchini and yellow summer squash. That's almost, I think, nearly 100% of these. They've got figures of 95 to 98% of sugar beets, 94% soya beans. All apparently 90% of papaya grown in the US, 100% in Hawaii and in China. Papaya is GE, so if you ever buy that, chances are. And the other problem is that, these products, especially corn and soy, are used to create a whole bunch of ingredients, derivatives, right, of high fructose corn syrup, maltodextrin. I mean, you probably know some of the names, Robin. We were talking
and even
about
soy, like soy lecithin, which is used. You might buy an organic chocolate bar, but the soy lecithin isn't organic.
So maybe that's a good time to tell my story about Good Earth, who I love, and I hope this doesn't offend them, because I love that store and we shop there all the time. And we have, my son and I both have gastrointestinal disorders and chronic bowel diseases that are life-threatening, and so we don't buy anything with a label. We actually can't eat anything with a label, which I figured out myself. I didn't really think about GMOs, but it probably has something to do with it. So anyway, we were in the store yesterday, and I asked the woman, "You don't sell GMO products here, do you?" After doing research on this radio show, and the cashier said, "Oh gosh, yeah, so we wouldn't be able to have a store without GMOs." And that's because 70 to 80 or maybe more % of the food, particularly the processed foods in the US, have GMO ingredients.
And this is Good Earth?
And this is Good Earth. But
wow.
What they did point me to, which I didn't know about, I knew about the non-GMO label, but they have a very extensive labeling system in there called the Non-GMO Project, which the owner, Mark Squire, is one of the co-founders
of the Non-GMO Project.
So, and this is one of the largest, fastest growing private independent labeling system for GMO products in the US. And so you look for the little stickers in there that say non-GMO. I think it has a monarch butterfly on it.
It has a little butterfly on it, yes.
Yeah, it's very pretty. And if you buy that, that's non-GMO Project verified. That's definitely going to be 100% non-GMO.
But it's not necessarily organic, just FYI.
It's not organic.
Yeah, and it just says there are no GMOs. So if you want organic, you need to look for both. The organic.
Organic imply non-GMOs?
Organic implies non-GMO.
Yeah.
But sometimes you'll see blue corn organic chips, but they're done in canola oil, which is GMO and not
GMO.
Organic.
And apparently there's this 5% loophole at least in the USDA organic label. There can be 95% of the ingredients are organic, and you can call the whole product organic. So it could actually include GMOs. But then Robin was saying that the CCOF,
I think the California organic certification is more stringent than the USDA.
The fact is, how do you know? Like, if 80% of our processed foods contain GMO ingredients, and don't forget the other foods, which I didn't mention, like dairy and meat and animal products, which are being raised on GMO feed stuff, and probably the bird seed that I give my birds outside in the garden is probably also GMO. And so, how do we? I don't know how we deal with labeling that. Actually, that's much more difficult, I would think.
Well, it's not difficult if they want to do it. It's difficult for us to get them.
Well, so I go to Good Earth and I want to buy GMO-free meat. And I'd always buy organic and grass-fed, but how do I know? They're probably feeding some GMO food, right?
I've heard Albert Strauss, who strives to not get any GMO feed, express the difficulty in that process. Yeah, so it's like a very difficult process to get
He does his own DNA testing on his feed himself to make sure that it's, and one of the reasons he lobbied so hard in Washington and worked really hard about releasing alfalfa is because alfalfa is a notorious cross-pollinator, and once you release GMO alfalfa, you can't keep the organic alfalfa pure. And so, he was talking about how he really has to work hard to make sure his feed is organic to his cattle. And non-GMO, because there is that contamination factor. We've had so much sent back. China won't take a lot of our stuff because they test it and they go, it's got GMO in it. They send it back to the U.S. Right. And a lot of our organic feed we have to buy from China because it's hard to find pure organic feed here. So it's tricky. I mean, I think a lot of it's the transparency of knowing your rancher or your, like Albert's cattle. He's so stringent about that. And then Mindful Meats, who buys organic dairy cattle, a lot of them from Strauss that are retired, you can find out who, like I know that Stemple Creek and Bee and Ranch, True Grass, a lot of those guys do not use GMO feed or, really they buy non-GMO. If there's a little contamination, there might be, but...
Sure. We have a high level of understanding of this problem in this county, and we are talking to an audience that is probably very knowledgeable on this for the most part.
Maybe.
There's a lot I don't know, so I wanted to ask a question, because I've known that around this number one, corn being the biggest crop that's modified, the seeds from that are not usable, so you have to buy again the licensing or whatever for next year. Is that true of all of the GMO products, or do some of them sustain their characteristics?
No, you have to buy the seeds from Monsanto.
Well, see,
if you get caught seed saving, they can sue the bejesus out of you.
Yeah, and so given that corn, number 2 or whatever, is the number one corn in this country around the world that people are eating, the fact that we are kind of a little eclectic group here fighting that trend, the big problem has to be stopping this idea that one type of one kind of food now is our investment in a monoculture that is in the hands of engineers. When they'll say with climate change, we can tweak this or we can make it more resistant. But I mean, this is a monster that has been unleashed, and it's already dominating. And we can, at the local level, lead our lives at a more sustainable, livable, healthy way. But we've also got to kill this monster, do we not?
Yeah, absolutely. The monocropping and all that. And the control of the entire food supply, and having corn syrup in everything, everything processed. I mean, it's just amazing.
I mean, another area that I was really shocked at in doing my research and trying to eliminate these from my diet, now that I have a child, he's 7, he has a lot of, as I said, health issues. And, we do our best to eat 100% organic. But then I was reading about GMOs in medicine, which I didn't really think about. And that predates the food industry. And apparently, G has been used for decades to make biopharmaceutical drugs and GMO medicines, all viral and bacterial vaccines, antivenoms, immunoglobulins, allergens, blood products, clotting factors, and all hormones and enzymes like pancreatins and modified somatic cells are all GMOs, okay? And not only that, but the supplement industry, which is also vastly unregulated, vitamin C and there are other binders and fillers and things that get in there, that magnesium stearate, these are all GMOs as well. So when I give my son and he has a fever, I try and buy the undyed baby Motrin or something. It's actually, I just realized by looking at the label, wow, that's actually got quite a lot of GMOs in it. So it's really insidious.
It's the fillers, it's like the stearates and
the high fructose corn syrup, the corn derivatives. It's the derivatives of corn and soy that you just can't get away with. And when my son was born, he was given mandatory vaccinations. He was whipped away from me, put in an ICU unit, and given formula. Okay, and formula I would never have given him formula, soy formula, and since then, his medical is it's a nightmare. Anyway, we have
a caller. Hi, caller, you're on the air. What's your name, please?
Are you talking about me?
Yes, that would be you.
Hi.
Hey, this is Paula calling in. I just want to...
Paula, hi, Paula.
Hey there. Just want to thank you so much for having the show today. I really don't know that much about what's going on with GMOs. Apparently, I'm learning so much from the content that's happening today on your show.
Great.
My perception, I keep seeing things in the news that we're winning against, Monsanto's being sued, they're losing. It seems like, there's certain countries that are saying they're banning GMOs. It feels, I have the perception somehow.
Paula, are you on speaker?
She's on a cell phone, right, Paula?
Yes.
Yeah, we don't have a great connection, but thank you for calling in with those questions, and maybe you can hear us on the air respond to what you just said, okay?
Yeah, Paula was asking about it appears that a lot's happening in the positive to push back against this, which is true. I was talking to the group earlier about when I first started covering GMOs 7-8 years ago. My friends were asking, what are you working on? I said, I'm doing this year-long project of writing about GMOs. And they said, you're writing about cars now? I mean, that was only 7 or 8 years ago that hardly anyone knew what a GMO was. And one of the great things about Prop 37, even though it failed, that was the labeling proposition for the state of California, we educated millions of people, and we were on the streets, and we were talking to people. And the beauty of it as well, and Raven touched on this before, is that what we found, and Pam Larry, who called in earlier, is that we had support from every single Tea Party organization in the state of California, all of the liberal organizations. We had religious organizations. We had right-wing, left-wing. This issue is an issue that crossed all boundaries. No one wants their food supply to be treated in this manner, and no one wants to be feeding themselves or their families GMOs.
Yet we all want to buy cheap food. And so most people who are on a budget, are working hard to earn their income, are faced with a situation where food has gotten so cheap. Part of the engineering is to allow it to have the longer shelf life so they can maybe sell it cheaper and more competitively. So I see that the profit-driven industry has prevailed because in the end we're economically kind of pressured into buying the cheap stuff and eating the cheap food. I know I do. I admit that even though I have the understanding and the hearing what you folks are saying about the dangers, I'm eating fast food. I'm eating foods my wife doesn't want me to eat because I have been addicted to this industrial food chain for a long time, and I haven't chosen to get out of it. I admire all the folks that have, but I think many of us feel totally trapped within it, and economics is one, and another is that we've adapted our tastes and expectations to the features that these GMs give us.
Well, you've been brainwashed by the advertisements and the advertising industry. Biotech and ag and processed food companies spend zillions of dollars since...
But I think even beyond the brain, you can get... someone having had a Coca-Cola addiction, myself, you can get... just like taste profile, it's just you've got that in your memory.
We're designed to crave sugar,
and they design these foods to make us get addicted to them. So
like McDonald's fries, I know I love them, and I know it's because of the chemistry that they've undergone to make me love them.
But it's also fast food culture. I mean, who wants to be in the kitchen cooking all day like I do? You don't, you got to just grab your snacks on the go.
You just roll down your window and they hand it to you.
Exactly, and then you
it's
can
like
buy
magic.
snack. But those are the really high risk GMO foods.
But what's happening is because of consumer pressure, McDonald's and others have said they're not going to buy the new Simplot GE or genetically engineered potatoes.
Okay, good news.
They are looking for new meat sources. They're responding. I mean, even though Chipotle's going through this bad spell with the E. coli thing, they have exploded in growth because people want to be able to buy. Campbell's soup is going to be, if they have GMOs in it, they're going to label. They're going to put labels on their food. The cereal manufacturers are dropping sugars and GMOs because of this backlash of the consumers in general. And they've seen cereal sales have dropped dramatically over the past 3 years because of the issues around genetically modified foods and issues of hyper-processed wheat causing digestive problems.
Now, we've been anti-GMO. We haven't had any pro-GMO calls yet. So I found a website, supposedly pro-GMO vegans, vegangmo.com. And these guys, they highlight 6 different reasons why GMOs are great. And one of them is animal testing. If you test GMOs, test the safety of GMOs on animals. That is animal cruelty. So don't test them. That was number 1. Animal alternatives. So the technology can help create alternatives to animal products. So you can change the flavor and texture of cheese that is non-animaling cheese and
tofu that tastes like meat.
If you want to make your own cheese and you buy the rennet that's a vegan rennet, it's a genetically modified rennet.
Oh no!
Yeah. So
what does that mean?
Anyway,
these are vegans.
Oh, it's a thing
enzyme that makes the cheese come together.
Oh,
And nutrition and health, here's a big one. So GE technology can benefit vegans by creating plants rich in nutrients vegans might lack, such as vitamin B12 and DHA. This would make it easier for people to go and stay vegan. Scientists have been enabling canola plants to produce DHA. Synthetic DHA can help save the lives of fish, who are often used as a source of omega-3s. People are animals too, and there are many in dire need of help. GE technology could help bring essential nutrients to starving populations, and GMO foods could even be used as vehicles for vaccine delivery. Well, they are, apparently. Huh?
Well, they are, yes, that's right. I mean, the standard argument is that, we're told that they make agriculture more sustainable, higher yields to feed the world's population, reduce pesticide use, which they don't, help meet the challenges of climate change. They reduce energy use, and what else? Make it farming more easier and more profitable, which we know is not true. Provide more nutritious foods, and none of those claims have been substantiated. I found this report on the internet called GMO Myths and Truths. Mm-hmm. It's a pretty comprehensive, quite technical document from 2012. It was updated, and they basically debunk all of those myths in that report, and it has hundreds of peer-reviewed scientific studies.
It's actually cost American farmers and our exports billions of dollars. It is not, the rest of the world does not want to buy this stuff from us. And one of the things that happens, I think it's been maybe 6-7 years, is when they're growing, they're testing these crops. They're supposed to test them in isolated areas or in greenhouses. So they grew some experimental rice crop in the southeast, which exports a great amount of rice. And the entire southeast rice crops were contaminated. Wow. So they lost almost $1 billion in exports. Wow. Now, the federal government stepped in and, of course, bailed out the farmers. But, and people aren't wanting to buy our feed that's contaminated. China's testing feed that they're buying from the U.S. and sending it back. So this does not help our farmers.
I don't think we mentioned that 64 countries worldwide, we didn't mention that, did we, have actually outlawed or mandated GMO labeling. Some of them have banned them outright, including the European Union, Russia, Australia, China, and Japan.
So that's all very un-American, if I may say so.
Yes.
These foreigners.
But if they're safe, why, if they're okay, why have all these other countries exercising the precautionary principle?
Well, Monsanto hasn't bought as many of their politicians as they have here, right?
Not as many.
Not as many.
Well, when those emails,
Argentina, they sure have.
The emails were released, I think the Snowden emails released showed what concerned me. I saw State Department emails that had gone out to the EU and specifically France, threatening them that they better get on board and stop this GMO ban, or they would face repercussions from the United States government. So we've been out there bullying people because if we can't get widespread acceptance, then the plan is not going to work.
So what about the Trans-Pacific Partnership and the Atlantic Partnership, which are the trade deals? If Monsanto says, your ban on GMOs is not what we want, we therefore will sue your country. I mean, that's what they're going to do. Right?
I think maybe we should have a show on that.
This has been such a great conversation. I wish to thank all of our listeners and our callers today for your participation. I hope you'll tune in every Thursday at 11 because your voice really does matter. And as I said at the beginning, this will be my last show for a while, so I wish to thank you all for listening to me rant.